I'm going the wrong way. I'm going to turn around again.
What psychologically caused social media influencer Jenny Blalock to crash her private airplane, sadly killing her and her father? We're going to break down her odd psychology and the many strange human factors resulting in Jenny curiously crashing her perfectly working airplane in good weather conditions, possibly making her the worst pilot in history. So now, let's get started.
About an hour into that flight, the report says the airplane started to descend rapidly before air traffic control lost contact with the pilot and the passenger. It says during the last several seconds of that flight, the aircraft was falling at a rate of more than 11,000 feet per minute.
Jenny, a social media influencer who went by TNFlyGirl or TNFlyGirl on YouTube, amassed tens of thousands of subscribers, taking you along on her journey of becoming a private airplane pilot.
I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible.
However, what we found out is that Jenny dangerously seemed more interested in becoming a social media influencer pilot than an actual pilot.
Jenny, as we're going to learn here, didn't get her private pilot's license until she had almost 200 hours of flight time. It took her to get finally signed off on her private pilot's license.
It interestingly took Jenny nearly 200 hours for her to finally get her private pilot's license, where it typically only takes about 60 flight hours.
Typically, that's in the 50 to 60 hour range for most people.
Although some who are unfamiliar with aviation may at first think that just means Jenny had more experience as a new pilot than others who get their private pilot's license after just the typical 60 hours. However, in aviation, that's not how that typically works. Having that many hours is similar to failing your driver's test about 10 times. Keep in mind too, some pilots in the military solo just after 15 flight hours.
Now, my training was with the military in the Navy, but I soloed after 15 hours.
But Jenny was sadly such a subpar pilot that she couldn't pick up on the operation and feel of her simple aircraft that not a single flight school wanted to accept the liability to sign her off to fly an airplane without an instructor.
Instructors weren't willing to sign her off because she just wasn't proficient in the airplane.
So what do you think happens when someone really wants to become a pilot, but flight school after flight school tells them heck no?
I think what you can read between the lines here is it took her so long because she had to go instructor shopping. Yep, I know you own an airplane. Yep, I know you got a YouTube channel. Yep, I know you really want to do this, but having a desire and owning an airplane doesn't make you a good pilot. You're going to kill yourself someday. And she did.
Right, they may shop around for a flight school to finally sign them off.
And my gut tells me that it's possible that one of the reasons it took Jenny so long to pass her check ride was because she had to find an instructor who would sign her off. If you have enough money to buy your own plane, you can probably afford to just change instructors as much as you want until someone finally says yes.
I think that she spent more time and thought on setting up the camera angles to video herself in kind of a selfie sort of mentality than she did actually getting good at flying the airplane.
Jenny would often video record and post her progress online, so she instead seemed to focus on conveying the image to her social media audience that she was a real pilot, where it seemed that Jenny was more concerned with appearing to be a pilot than actually becoming a highly competent one. In psychology, this impression management that social media often allows can sometimes distort a person's self-perception, reinforce overconfidence, and create psychological pressure to maintain the appearance of competence. In other words, since social media for her seemed to be mostly about appearing as a pilot, her knowledge of piloting an airplane remained extremely superficial. The whole fake it till you make it mantra works a lot better on Wall Street than it does in aviation, because gravity has a nasty habit of fact-checking people who mistake confidence with competence.
It's telling me I need to go that way. And that didn't make any sense.
No, that's wrong, because like I say, the interstate's right under us.
And what we see is a pilot who is distracted and doesn't really know what she's doing in the first place. And meanwhile, we have a non-pilot passenger commanding the autopilot unprompted. In the airline industry, we would call this a breakdown of CRM, albeit unintentional. These two people think they're helping each other when they're actually working against each other. But he was all too ready and willing to try to help his daughter fly this airplane when he clearly had no business doing so.
Just watch my airspeed if you don't mind. Turn that heat down, will you?
How do you turn it down? Where's your circuit breakers?
They're down there.
it would not seem to be appropriate for an unqualified, non-pilot passenger to try to fix an airplane and fly it by fooling around the circuit breakers.
When Jenny would fly with her father, she would ask him for help as if he were her co-pilot, even though he apparently had no aviation experience.
There seems to have been no briefing or discussion about what he should do or how to do it.
I'll just let you fly. How about that?
Where she would often even tell her father to take over flying the aircraft without even giving him any real instruction.
She has turned over the controls to her father so she can turn around and turn on her camera.
All right.
48, Foxtrot Alpha, left base.
Judging from the view out the window, it's obvious they've just taken off and are only a few hundred feet in the air.
New pilot Jenny here even tells her father to fly the airplane right after takeoff so she can adjust the camera.
The instructors that said basically Jenny got confused a lot. She was very slow to respond.
Would DKX be this way or that way?
This way. This way.
Well, it's got us going in the wrong direction.
It's hard to believe what's happening here. She's still within sight of the airport she departed from, and we heard her say that she's going to fly east after takeoff. Now she's going west, is confused, and doesn't know which way she's supposed to go in order to get to her destination, DKX. She resorts to asking her passenger for help, and he is just as lost as she is.
She would get spun around and lost constantly, even after just taking off from the airport.
She spends a period of time playing around with the Garmin 355, during which she turns about 20 degrees to the right without realizing it. She then begins an earnest right turn for an unknown reason. She seems to be turning in random directions with no rhyme or reason and no thought process behind these turns.
I'm going the wrong way.
Skyhawk 37 Lima, turning.
At this point, the flight track from takeoff until now is probably going to look something like this. She's done an S-turn and almost 2 complete 360-degree turns.
Where she would regularly fly, meandering circles in complete confusion, and apparently had little to no sense of direction and would get distracted often.
When he flew with Jenny, sometimes he would have to take over the radio so she could focus on flying.
I'm going to turn around again.
Could they be working against each other?
I turned this off accidentally. I don't know how to turn it back on. Look on my phone and see if you could see traffic on that. You know how to open up ForeFlight.
No, I don't know nothing about this thing.
Traffic's not showing up on here. And then a kick in the pants.
Jenny seemed to have a very defeatist attitude towards flying, which psychologically may have reinforced feelings of helplessness, low self-efficacy, and a lack of confidence in her ability to properly control and understand the aircraft under pressure and duress. Given all of that and so much more, it's no wonder her father would get airsick when flying with Jenny.
I don't want you to get nauseous, so just kind of enjoy the...
No,
And here's your drink right there.
On December 7th, 2023.
The flight took off from the Knoxville Downtown Island Airport around 10 in the morning and was headed towards a small airport in Benton, Arkansas. Jenny Blalock was flying that plane, and her father, James Blalock, was a passenger.
In her Beechcraft Debonair airplane on a 430 nautical mile flight to Saline County Regional Airport in Benton, Arkansas.
Off 10 miles west, 2 Alpha 0 is 2.
You could hear very faintly in the background that she's declaring an emergency. I've got an emergency, or something to that effect, she says, indicating to us as her airplane is out of control. The report lets us know exactly how out of control it is, because for 25 minutes, which is an eternity, this aircraft was severely out of control. The oscillations were as much as plus or minus 1,500 feet.
Yes, for a whole 25 minutes, she was flying her perfectly working airplane in good weather while oscillating up and down, eventually sadly flying it into the ground. This is not a sudden accident that happened fast like flying into a mountain.
Captain Tafuri is floundering in the pitch darkness. The pilots don't know it, but when the plane veered off course, it crossed over the mountains. The plane's ground proximity warning system is telling them they're about to crash.
Easy does it! Easy does it!
Nope. I could feel that we were just violently just going up. People were screaming, and everybody knew on the flight that something was very wrong.
She had a lot of time to figure this out, but apparently just made the situation worse and worse. For nearly 25 minutes, her aircraft continued to oscillate up and down, while Jenny simply did not know how to stop the aircraft from descending into the ground.
But she never reestablished level flight, so chances are she was fighting the autopilot the entire time and completely unaware that her trim inputs were actually making things worse. And the NTSB said that what happened is that she probably eventually disconnected the autopilot, but by that point it was too late, and the aircraft had so much nose-down trim applied that it pitched forward into a steep dive, and as the airspeed began to rapidly increase, it became impossible for her to apply the control forces necessary to recover, as the rate of descent exceeded 10,000 feet per minute until they crashed into the ground below, killing Jenny and her father instantly.
This is just mind-blowing because one of the most basic concepts in aviation is maintaining altitude. As an aviation enthusiast, I've heard of nearly every single pilot error imaginable.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
Plane is about to stall. It lowers the nose and puts the Airbus into a steep dive to regain speed. The plane dives at a frightening 40,000 feet per minute. Piskarev has pulled the aircraft out of the dive, but it's climbing too quickly.
We'll get out of this. Everything is fine.
In all the chaos of the past few minutes, the pilots don't know exactly how far they've fallen. Suddenly, they run out of time.
But a slow, uncontrolled descent in good conditions in a perfectly functioning aircraft for nearly 25 minutes is genuinely difficult to comprehend.
Jenny had problems, and they were annotated from her instructors, moving the trim in the wrong direction. The instructor said she got confused and she would push nose down trim and make it even worse. And then she was depending on the automation.
However, for a very new pilot who doesn't know how trim works in an aircraft, I suppose it's quite possible.
Flight instructors who had flown with the pilot before the accident indicated that she routinely demonstrated poor manual aircraft handling and struggled with cockpit automation, including autopilot and trim.
Psychologically, in those 25 minutes, panic and cognitive overload likely began taking over in Jenny's mind.
She's struggling with this for 25 full minutes to try to get control of this aircraft, and there was nothing wrong with the airplane.
When Jenny felt that she could not control her aircraft, even though there was no reason why she couldn't control her aircraft, her sympathetic division of her autonomic nervous system kicked in, causing her to panic and possibly freeze, which further impaired her decision-making, situational awareness, and ability to calmly solve even the most basic problem. Under extreme stress, like Jenny may have experienced, the human brain often shifts away from rational problem solving into pure survival mode, where attention narrows, thinking becomes chaotic, and people can become fixated on the wrong controls or problems while completely missing obvious solutions directly in front of them.
We've tried everything. Because they weren't believing the situation that they were now in, they just went back to basic instinct, which is, I want to go up. I want to stop falling. Let's pull the nose up.
Finally, Dubois understands. First Officer Bonin is causing the stall by pulling the nose up.
No, don't climb.
By the time they figure it out, it's too late.
At 2,000 feet, sensors detect the ocean's surface and trigger new alarms.
We're going to crash. This can't be true.
The aircraft hits the water at almost 200 kilometers an hour.
I forgot what it meant. I just know that once we get at the altitude, I just know we hit that button.
It's kind of rote memorization of what is the next thing. I don't know what that button does. All I know is that I push that button.
However, since her understanding of flying appeared to rely on rote memorization rather than deep conceptual mastery and understanding of flight and control, once panic set in, her ability to adapt and problem solve likely collapsed very quickly. Yeah, this is because rote memorization often breaks down under extreme stress, whereas true mastery and deep internalized understanding of concepts are far more resilient during high-pressure emergencies. Also, rote memory falls apart when situations become highly dynamic and unpredictable. Do you know why? Yes, because the person is no longer following a familiar sequence of steps, but instead must rapidly adapt by problem solving through understanding the physics and controls of flying an aircraft. A rote memory does not allow for flexible thinking, deep understanding, or rapid adaptation when something unexpected happens.
Her first airplane that Jenny had purchased was a nice little Piper, 160 horsepower engine. This is a great starter airplane, very forgiving.
According to multiple sources, one of the reasons why Jenny bought the Debonair was because not long after getting her private pilot certificate, she landed in the Piper Cherokee and tried to exit the runway at a high rate of speed and skidded off the taxiway into a ditch.
Very nice airplane. Beautiful. Retractable gear. 260 horsepower Continental engine. This thing is like night and day compared to that little Piper that she had. She upgrades to this Beechcraft Bonaire, this hot rod, and she wasn't even ready for the Piper.
Although many of us would never put ourselves in a life or death situation like what Jenny sadly did to herself and her father, I think we can all imagine a situation where we get in over our heads and suddenly realize how little we actually know and start to panic. And yes, it's quite possible that even if Jenny didn't panic at all, she still may not have known how to keep her aircraft from crashing into the ground.
That she had real problems with identifying trim issues with the airplane, and she would often trim in the wrong direction, and that she was obsessed with the automation in the airplane.
Jenny sadly seemed to not understand how her airplane's trim system worked. She lacked situational awareness and also seemed to rely too heavily on her autopilot.
But she just doesn't have that fundamental understanding of what the trim is doing and how it's a feel that you get as a pilot. I don't understand how she doesn't get the feel, but again, not everybody should have a pilot's license.
Since trim directly controls the aircraft's pitch attitude, a heavily nose-down trim setting can cause the airplane to continuously descend even when the pilot pulls up on the controls.
Many pilots they'll try to grab the autopilot to bail them out of a bad situation. The autopilot's not designed to do that. The autopilot needs you to have the airplane in trim. She never gets proficient with the feel of the airplane. 25 minutes, that is an eternity that she is wrestling with trying to get this airplane in trim, which just tells me she doesn't know what she's doing. She stated that she would often confuse the trim direction and would manually adjust the trim in the wrong direction.
If Jenny did not know what her trim setting needed to be, she may have unknowingly entered a dangerous cycle of over-trimming and then under-trimming the aircraft.
She's probably pushing over on the controls, pulling back on them, trying to get the trim, but pushing it in the wrong direction, making it worse, fighting it. Airspeed's going down, coming up. She's not doing anything with the throttles. That's why the airplane is speeding up and then slowing down. She's not giving the right throttle inputs at all.
The NTSB later discovered that Jenny had a lot of problems understanding this system. According to one of her instructors, sometimes she would trim up or down the wrong way, and the autopilot would blink faster and faster, basically telling her that she's trimming in the wrong direction. You can see the series of oscillations in altitude kept getting worse and worse, and most likely what's happening is that Jenny is essentially fighting the autopilot this entire time. It's telling her to trim up, but instead she's trimming down, and vice versa,
causing the reported repeated up and down oscillations in altitude as she continuously fought against the airplane instead of properly leveling it.
And at some point, it just totally loses it and she can't pull it out of this steep dive.
Eventually, sadly leading her to fatally crash the airplane into the ground.
You need to master the basic stick and rudder skills necessary to fly before you start using the automation. And then when you use the automation, you need to fully understand it or just turn it off. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself killed.
Autopilot can be a convenience for more experienced pilots, but for a very new pilot, it can be psychologically dangerous to use. Do you know why?
It's a primitive device and will not protect the airplane from dangerous situations. The first thing most pilots are taught about autopilots, especially older models like this, is that it will kill you if you let it.
Yes, because it can create a false sense of competence while also preventing the new pilot from fully developing the instinctive aircraft control skills needed to fly their airplane and save their airplane in case of a real emergency. Therefore, the social media influencer Jenny never developed this skill, understanding, and feel for flying an airplane manually, but instead seemed to rely mostly on technology and automation to apparently make her feel that she's a real pilot to achieve her apparently desired social media attention.
I think we have a working autopilot. Woo!
It feels so good to finally have a functioning autopilot that held altitude.
She may have thought that she can just automate away her lack of real-world flying skills and her understanding of aviation. Yeah, a little scary that Jenny was possibly solo flying an aircraft above you and your home.
The pilot's training history showed that she had demonstrated difficulty maintaining situational awareness. It's like, where are you right now? Right? Is the airport over there? Is the airport over there? Are you just climbing? Are you descending? All of those things are part of situational awareness. She had struggles with that.
Jenny also reportedly severely lacked situational awareness, which in aviation refers to a pilot's ability to accurately understand what is happening around them in real time, including their altitude, direction, surroundings, and airspeed.
On the wrong way. See where it takes us. Perhaps it's taking us. That ain't right. DKX be this way or that way?
This way, this way.
Well, it's got us going in the wrong direction. That's not making any sense. See? Well, it's telling me I need to go that way. And that didn't make any sense. No.
Yes, psychologically, all the very important things that a pilot must know to operate an aircraft safely.
She seems to be turning in random directions with no rhyme or reason and no thought process behind these turns. While on a southerly heading, she briefly stops her turn, realizing she's confused. She starts to turn to the left, which would be the correct way to go, but then she goes right again. She states, "I cannot get back on track."
I'm going the wrong way. I'm going to turn around again.
If a pilot lacks situational awareness, they can become dangerously disconnected from what the aircraft is actually doing, causing them to miss obvious warning signs, fixate on the wrong problems, and completely fail to recognize how close they are to danger. Psychologically, situational awareness is the brain's ability to continuously gather, process, and correctly interpret rapidly changing information in real time while maintaining an accurate mental picture of reality. Yeah, since not everyone possesses sufficient situational awareness, stress tolerance, spatial reasoning, rapid decision-making ability, multitasking skills, emotional regulation, and cognitive processing speed, not everyone should be an aircraft pilot. This now brings up a fascinating psychological concept called counterphobic behavior, leading to overcompensation. This is where a person curiously becomes psychologically drawn towards mastering or publicly identifying with the very thing that they secretly fear, struggle with, or feel inadequate at, often causing them to overcompensate by obsessively trying to prove competence to others and themselves.
Instead, he took the controls and he corrected for her, and then he had her fly the rest of the approach visually, but what Jenny did next in the video was the most shocking part to me. Watch and read the text that she added on the screen. the instructor wasn't there to help her, then she'd probably be dead. However, she doesn't seem to realize that, and instead she's focused on blaming the instructor for setting her up for a bad landing.
Since they may feel they're inadequate at it and others around them may also perceive them as lacking ability in that area, it psychologically increases the emotional value and symbolic importance of finally proving that they're good at it. For example, a child who is always bad at math oddly choosing to become a math major in college, because deep down they are not simply pursuing mathematics, they are psychologically trying to disprove and even trying to erase years of insecurity, embarrassment, and perceived inadequacy. Therefore, achieving great success in math becomes overly valued in their mind. It's not just about math anymore, it becomes psychologically tied to their self-worth, identity, and need to prove themselves to everyone. Sometimes those who do this become wildly successful. For example, Michael Jordan became famously driven after feeling rejected, embarrassed, and inadequate when he was cut from his high school basketball team.
I took offense to that. That's all I needed for him to do that, and it became personal with me. But from that point on, he's been on my list.
Thereby using those feelings of inadequacy as psychological fuel to overcompensate and ultimately become one of the greatest athletes of all time. However, flying an aircraft solo is much different than attempting to become a great basketball player or learning math. You know why? Yes, because aviation, due to the painful laws of physics, does not tolerate prolonged incompetence, poor judgment, and weak capability. Now, do you think Jenny was known by her family and friends as someone who was a skilled motor vehicle driver with strong understanding of physics, situational awareness, and excellent decision-making under pressure?
I'm going the wrong way.
Right, probably not, because people who naturally possess those personality traits usually demonstrate them consistently throughout many areas areas of their life, long before ever attempting to be an aircraft pilot. Therefore, if Jenny was likely not naturally good at it, why do you think she chose aviation? It may have become tied to proving to herself and everyone around her that she was competent, impressive, intelligent, capable, and worthy of admiration in a field where she felt insecure and inadequate. And social media likely amplified this psychological drive even further and became even more rewarding for her to gain wide public attention and admiration for becoming a pilot, feeling that she's erasing the feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, and embarrassment of her past.
Instead of looking outside and applying basic airmanship, she was focused on her iPad and trying to figure out what her autopilot was doing and trying to get the autopilot to fly the aircraft for her.
She ain't climbing good at all. Well, this is an autopilot, and I'm
Jenny was over-reliant on technology instead of basic airmanship or stick and rudder skills, and the truth was that her fundamental skills were lacking, and she was further behind than what her total flight hours and approaches on paper would indicate. Perhaps she was more focused on the social media attention than she was on being a pilot.
However, the big problem was that she was clearly not focused on truly mastering the skill of flying a plane, but instead seemed far more interested in making others believe that she was a highly competent pilot that should be admired. And if all of that wasn't enough, investigators reportedly found multiple FAA blacklisted medications in her system during the toxicology analysis following the crash.
She had a whole pharmacy worth of drugs in her system, and here's a list of all the drugs that they found during the autopsy after the crash.
Far as we know, no one had any idea that Jenny was on so many drugs. That's because when you go to do your FAA medical exam, you're required to self-report any medications that you're taking, but the only thing that Jenny told her doctor was that she used some over-the-counter stuff for seasonal allergies.
Where those medications may have contributed to impairing Jenny's cognitive abilities required to safely operate an aircraft. When combined, these medications likely at least reduced Jenny's situational awareness further, impairing her concentration and emotional regulation, and reduced her ability to process rapidly changing information in real time, all psychological functions absolutely critical for safely flying an aircraft.
She would stab at the button, trying, almost kind of in a panicky way, why won't this work kind of way. The instructor said, calm down, just push it and hold it. But again, she was flustered, and that might have had something to do with the amount of drugs that was in her system.
Yeah, there's a reason why so many of those substances are outright banned by the FAA for pilots. It's because even mild psychological or cognitive impairment while operating an aircraft can quickly turn into a fatal disaster.
Even though the NTSB said that Jenny may have been impaired, they couldn't determine if that contributed to the crash, considering her demonstrated baseline proficiency in the aircraft.
However, Jenny's piloting capability reportedly appeared to be so poor that FAA investigators seemingly questioned how much of those substances actually contributed to the crash. Because even without those medications in her system, her understanding of basic aircraft control, trim management, situational awareness, and manual flying ability already appeared dangerously inadequate. Surprisingly, Jenny made it a whole year and a half with her pilot's license before she fatally crashed her airplane. I think we all understand Darwinism, where some people make reckless decisions and suffer the consequences themselves. However, the saddest part in all of this is that her father, someone without flight experience, was on board with her and lost his life too. In those final moments, we can sadly hear her father turn on his headset microphone in a last-ditch effort to beg air traffic control for help.
Blue Streak 5198, descend via the Swift arrival. Nashville is landing to the south, and the altimeter is 3019.
Ready, copy, descend via the Swift, landing south, Blue Streak 5198.
Oh, the hell no.
Section 343, descend and maintain flight level 210.
I think this case makes it clear that not everyone should be an aircraft pilot.
The airplane crashed in a wooded area near Pulaski. The cockpit was destroyed on impact, and no flight instruments or gauges could be identified or recovered from that crash.
Now in the comments, what do you think is the biggest reason why Jenny fatally crashed her airplane? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. For Jenny, there was way too many things going wrong, psychologically, cognitively, operationally, and unfortunately it was only a matter of time before TNFlyGirl eventually crashed her plane. Unfortunately, it was fatal. see you next time.